The gunshot echoed through the warehouse, and Imani's scream died in her throat as Park Ji-hoon stepped in front of her, his body a shield she never asked for, but desperately needed. His hand found hers in the darkness, his darkness, the one he'd lived in for months, and squeezed with a certainty that defied his blindness. "Stay behind me," he commanded, his voice cold steel wrapped in silk. The men advancing toward them hesitated, not because of the gun in Ji-hoon's hand, but because of the lethal promise in his stance. He couldn't see them, but he didn't need to. He'd already calculated their positions by sound, by the shift of air, by instincts honed through years of surviving in a world where weakness meant death. Imani's heart hammered against her ribs. 3 months ago, she'd signed a contract she barely read, desperate for money to save her grandmother. 3 months ago, she'd married a stranger in a cold ceremony that felt more like a business transaction than a wedding. 3 months ago, everyone told her she was doomed. They didn't know that the blind man she'd married could see her more clearly than anyone ever had. Imani Washington's feet ached with the kind of pain that had become her constant companion, a dull throb that started in her heels and radiated up her calves, a souvenir from 10-hour shifts at Mama Chen's diner in the heart of Los Angeles. She'd just finished the dinner rush, her apron stained with grease and her hair pulled back into a bun that had started the day neat, but now sat lopsided on her head. The tips had been decent, but decent wasn't enough when the hospital bills kept coming. "Imani, table 7 needs water," called Marcus, the other server working the evening shift. She grabbed the pitcher without complaint, forcing a smile as she approached a family of 4 celebrating a birthday. The little girl couldn't have been more than 6, her eyes bright with excitement over a cupcake with a single candle. For a moment, Imani felt the familiar twist in her chest, the one that came whenever she saw families intact and happy. Her own grandmother, the woman who'd raised her after her parents died in a car accident when she was 8, was lying in a hospital bed across town, her body failing in ways that medicine could slow but not stop. "Here you go," Imani said warmly, filling their glasses. The father tipped her extra and she tucked the bills into her apron with a whispered thank you. By the time her shift ended at 11, the streetlights of Koreatown cast long shadows across the pavement. Imani walked quickly, her keys threaded between her fingers the way her grandmother had taught her. The neighborhood was safe enough during the day, but night brought out different elements, the kind that operated in the spaces between legal and lethal. She just turned onto her street when she noticed the black Mercedes parked in front of her apartment building. Expensive, out of place, the kind of car that didn't belong in a neighborhood where most people took the bus. A man stood beside it, tall and lean in a suit that probably cost more than Imani made in 6 months. He was Korean, maybe in his 30s, with sharp features and eyes that assessed her with professional detachment. "Imani Washington?" His English was perfect, barely accented. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but curiosity and exhaustion rooted her in place. "Who's asking?" "My name is Kang Dae-jung. I represent Park Ji-hoon." He reached into his jacket, slowly, deliberately, and pulled out a business card. "My employer has a proposition for you." Imani didn't take the card. "I don't know anyone named Park Ji-hoon, and I'm not interested in any propositions. Your grandmother's medical bills total approximately $247,000, Dae-jung said calmly. "The hospital has given you 30 days before they transfer her to a public facility where the quality of care will be significantly reduced. My employer is prepared to pay those bills in full, plus provide you with a monthly stipend of $10,000. The number hit Imani like a physical blow. She'd been drowning in debt for months, picking up extra shifts, skipping meals, selling everything she owned of value. $247,000 would save her grandmother's life. "What's the catch?" Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "A marriage contract. 1 year. You would live in Mr. Park's residence, present yourself as his wife at necessary functions, and maintain absolute discretion about the arrangement. After 1 year, you receive a divorce and an additional $200,000. Imani laughed, the sound bitter and tired. "This is insane. Why would anyone—" "Mr. Park has his reasons," Dae-jung interrupted smoothly. "Reasons that don't concern you beyond the terms of the contract. You have 24 hours to decide. If you agree, bring identification to this address tomorrow evening at 7. He placed the card on the hood of a nearby car. "If you don't show, we'll never contact you again, and you can forget this conversation ever happened." He got into the Mercedes without another word, and Imani watched the taillights disappear around the corner. She stood there for a long moment before picking up the card. The address was in Hancock Park. Old money, serious security, a different world. Inside her cramped studio apartment, Imani stared at her grandmother's photo on the bedside table. Lorraine Washington had worked 3 jobs to raise her, had sacrificed everything to make sure Imani graduated high school, had taught her about strength and dignity and faith. Now she was dying, and Imani was powerless to stop it. Unless she wasn't. The contract was insane, probably illegal in ways she couldn't even imagine, but it was also a lifeline thrown to a drowning woman, and Imani had never been good at letting go of lifelines. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she researched. Park Ji-hoon's name appeared in business journals, real estate mogul, tech investments, philanthropic donations to Korean cultural centers. The legitimate face was impressive, but Imani knew how to read between lines. There were gaps in his history, connections to people whose names appeared in crime reports, a careful distance maintained between his public persona and the whispers that followed certain Korean businesses in LA. Mafia. The word sat heavy in her mind. She was considering marrying into the Korean mafia. At 6:30 the next evening, Imani stood in front of her mirror, her natural hair styled in twists, wearing the only dress she owned that could pass for formal, a simple black sheath she'd bought second-hand for a friend's funeral. Her brown skin glowed under the harsh bathroom light, and she met her own eyes with a mixture of determination and terror. "Forgive me, Grandma," she whispered. The house in Hancock Park was a mansion, all clean lines and understated wealth behind iron gates that opened automatically as her Uber approached. Dae-jung met her at the door, his expression unchanged from the night before. "Miss Washington, this way." The interior was stunning. Hardwood floors, contemporary art, floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked a manicured garden. But Imani barely noticed the decor because her attention locked onto the man standing by the window. Park Ji-hoon was beautiful in a way that seemed almost unfair, tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of face that belonged in magazines. His black hair was perfectly styled, his suit tailored to emphasize his build, but it was his eyes that caught her, dark, intense, and staring at a point 3 feet to her left. He was blind. The realization hit her like cold water. This powerful, dangerous man couldn't see. "Miss Washington has arrived," Dae-jung announced. Ji-hoon's head turned toward her voice with uncanny precision, but his gaze remained unfocused. "Thank you, Dae-jung. Leave us." His voice matched everything else about him, deep, controlled, with an edge that suggested violence was always an option. Imani's heart raced as the door closed behind Dae-jung, leaving her alone with a blind mob boss. "You came," Ji-hoon said. It wasn't a question. "You're paying off $250,000 in debt." "Of course I came." Imani lifted her chin, refusing to be intimidated despite every instinct screaming that she was in over her head. "But I have questions." "I'm sure you do." Ji-hoon moved toward a chair with the kind of spatial awareness that suggested he'd memorized every inch of this room. He sat with casual grace, gesturing to the sofa across from him. "Sit. Ask." Imani sat. "Why me? There are thousands of women in LA who'd jump at this offer, but only one who fits my specific requirements," Ji-hoon replied. "You have no family beyond your grandmother, no romantic attachments, no social media presence. You work hard, keep your head down, and need money desperately enough to consider a proposition that any sane person would refuse. Most importantly, you have no connections to my world, which means no conflicting loyalties. You investigated me. It should have felt creepy. Instead, it felt oddly practical, thoroughly. I know you graduated high school with honors but couldn't afford college. I know you send half your paycheck to the hospital. I know you volunteer at the community center on Sundays when you're not working. I know you're smart, careful, and loyal." Ji-hoon's lips curved into something that might have been a smile. "You're perfect." "Perfect for what, exactly?" "For convincing certain people that I've settled down, that I'm focused on domestic life rather than business expansion, that I'm vulnerable." His eyes still didn't find hers, but the intensity in his voice made up for it. "People make mistakes when they think their opponent is weak. I intend to capitalize on those mistakes. You want to use me as bait." The words felt cold on Imani's tongue. "I want to use you as camouflage," Ji-hoon corrected. "No one will be targeting you. They'll be targeting me and finding me much more prepared than they anticipated. And if you're wrong, if they do come after me, then they'll discover that everything I own is protected with lethal efficiency." Ji-hoon leaned forward, and even without being able to see her, his presence was overwhelming. "I don't fail to protect what's mine, Miss Washington. Sign this contract and you become mine. That means no harm comes to you, ever." The possessiveness in his tone should have been a red flag. Instead, it sent an unexpected shiver down Imani's spine. She blamed exhaustion and stress for the flutter in her stomach. 1 year, she said, and then I'm free. 1 year, Ji-hoon agreed. The contract is on the table beside you. Read it carefully. I'll answer any questions. Imani read. The terms were exactly as Dae-jung had outlined. Marriage, cohabitation, public appearances, absolute discretion. The compensation was staggering. The penalties for breach of contract were terrifying. But at the bottom, in stark black ink, was the clause that made her hand tremble. All medical expenses for Lorraine Washington will be paid in full within 24 hours of contract execution. She thought of her grandmother's smile, of the life that had been poured into raising her, of the debt that was killing her as surely as any disease. Where do I sign? The wedding was nothing like Imani had imagined when she was a little girl dreaming of fairy tales. No white dress, no flowers, no guests. Just her, Ji-hoon, Dae-jung, and a lawyer in a sterile office downtown. Ji-hoon's hand found hers for the ring exchange with surprising ease, his fingers warm against her cold ones. The wedding band he slid onto her finger was simple platinum, expensive but understated. You may kiss the bride, the officiant said, sounding bored. Ji-hoon's hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb finding her lips with gentle precision. The kiss was brief, chaste, but Imani felt it all the way to her toes. His lips were soft, his touch careful, and when he pulled away, something in his expression had softened almost imperceptibly. Mrs. Park, he murmured, and the name felt foreign on Imani's ears. By evening, she was moving into the Hancock Park mansion with her 3 suitcases of belongings. A housekeeper named Mrs. Kim, a stern Korean woman in her 60s, showed Imani to her room with barely concealed disapproval. Master's room is at the end of the hall, Mrs. Kim said in heavily accented English. You do not go there, you do not disturb, understand? Understood, Imani replied, too tired to be offended. Her room was larger than her entire previous apartment, with an ensuite bathroom that had a tub big enough to swim in. The bed was massive, covered in high thread count sheets that probably cost more than her monthly rent used to. Imani sat on the edge and called the hospital. Your grandmother's bills have been paid in full, the nurse told her, sounding shocked. All of them, and she's been moved to a private suite. I don't know what you did, but— Thank you, Imani interrupted, her voice breaking. Can I visit tomorrow? Of course. She's been asking for you. Imani hung up and let herself cry. Ugly, gulping sobs of relief and terror and exhaustion. She'd saved her grandmother. She'd also sold herself into a year-long contract with a man she didn't know, couldn't read, and definitely shouldn't trust. A soft knock interrupted her breakdown. Come in, she called, wiping her face hastily. Ji-hoon entered, navigating the unfamiliar room with only slight hesitation. He'd changed into casual clothes, black slacks and a white button-down that he'd left partially unbuttoned, revealing a hint of a tattoo on his collarbone. Imani quickly looked away, feeling intrusive even though he couldn't see her staring. Mrs. Kim said you were upset, he said, stopping a respectful distance from the bed. I'm fine, just processing. Imani took a shaky breath. The hospital called. My grandmother's bills are paid, thank you. That was the agreement. Ji-hoon tilted his head, listening. You've been crying. How do you— Your breathing is uneven, your voice is thick. I can hear it. He moved closer, his hand reaching out until it found the bedpost. I need you to understand something, Imani. This arrangement is transactional, but I'm not cruel. You're in my home, under my protection. If you need something, you ask. I need to know I didn't just make the biggest mistake of my life, Imani said honestly. Ji-hoon's expression was unreadable. That depends on your definition of mistake. You saved your grandmother. You secured your financial future. You'll live in comfort for a year. Those aren't small things. And in exchange, I'm married to a crime lord who's using me as a decoy. Imani stood, suddenly needing to move. Forgive me if I'm not thrilled about the arrangement. Crime lord. Ji-hoon's lips twitched. Dramatic. I prefer businessman with unconventional methods. Is that what we're calling the Korean mafia now? We're calling it whatever keeps you safe and compliant. The humor vanished from his voice. I need you to trust me, Imani, or at least trust that I have significant motivation to keep you alive and unharmed. My entire plan relies on you playing your role convincingly. What role exactly? Stand around and look pretty. Stand around and look devoted, Ji-hoon corrected. We have a charity gala next week. Several business associates will be there, people who need to believe I'm distracted by domestic bliss. You'll wear something beautiful. Hold my arm, smile when appropriate, and let me introduce you as my beloved wife." The word beloved sounded strange coming from his cold, calculating mouth. Imani wondered if he'd ever actually loved anyone, or if emotion was just another tool in his arsenal. "I can do that," she said, "but I need something from you too." "Name it." "Honesty. If I'm going to be in danger, I deserve to know. Don't treat me like a mushroom." "A mushroom?" Ji-hoon's brow furrowed. "Kept in the dark and fed shit." Imani crossed her arms. "I'm not stupid and I'm not fragile. Respect me enough to tell me the truth." For a long moment, Ji-hoon was silent. Then he nodded slowly. "There are 3 rival organizations who would love to see me dead or diminished. The Yakuza to the north, the Triads in San Francisco, and the Sinaloa cartel moving in from the south. All of them think my blindness makes me weak. All of them are planning to test that theory in the coming months. Your presence as my wife suggests I'm settling down, becoming soft. They'll make their moves sooner, sloppier, and I'll be ready. And if they come after me instead, they won't survive the attempt." The certainty in Ji-hoon's voice was absolute, terrifying, and oddly thrilling. "I don't make idle threats, Imani. Anyone who touches what's mine dies screaming. That's not hyperbole. That's a promise." Imani should have been horrified. Instead, she felt something warm and dangerous unfurl in her chest, a sense of security she hadn't felt since her grandmother got sick. This man was deadly, blind, and completely certain of his ability to protect her, and God help her, she believed him. "Okay," she said softly. "I'll play devoted wife, but Ji-hoon, don't make me regret this more than I already do. I'll do my best." He turned to leave, navigating back to the door with practiced ease. But before he exited, he paused. "Imani?" "Yes?" "Welcome home, Mrs. Park." The door closed behind him, and Imani sat back down on her absurdly expensive bed, wondering what the hell she'd gotten herself into. Her phone buzzed, a text from the hospital with visiting hours. Tomorrow she'd see her grandmother, explain somehow that she'd married a stranger, and try to make it sound less insane than it was. But tonight, in this mansion that smelled like money and danger, Imani let herself imagine, just for a moment, what it might feel like if this were real. If Ji-hoon's protection came with affection, if the ring on her finger meant something more than a business transaction. She fell asleep still wearing it, the platinum band catching the moonlight through her window. The charity gala was held at the Beverly Wilshire, and Imani felt like an imposter the moment she stepped into the hotel lobby. The dress Ji-hoon had sent to her room was midnight blue silk that hugged her curves and fell to the floor in elegant waves. A stylist had come to the mansion that afternoon, transforming Imani's natural hair into an elaborate updo with gold accessories woven through the twists. Diamond earrings, borrowed, the stylist assured her, sparkled at her ears. "You look beautiful," Ji-hoon said when she met him in the foyer. He wore a black tuxedo that made him look like he'd stepped out of a cologne advertisement, and Imani hated that her heart skipped when he smiled. "You can't even see me," she pointed out. "Dae-jung described you. Besides, I can tell by the way Mrs. Kim stopped complaining. She only does that when she's impressed." Ji-hoon offered his arm. "Ready?" Imani took it, and they walked to the waiting car, a different Mercedes, this one with a driver who held the door with military precision. Dae-jung sat in the front passenger seat, his jacket bulging slightly in a way that suggested he was armed. "Remember," Ji-hoon said as they drove, "you're madly in love with me. You can't keep your hands off me. You think I'm the most fascinating man you've ever met." "That's a lot of acting," Imani muttered. "You'll manage. Just think about the 200,000 waiting for you at the end of the year." The ballroom was stunning. Crystal chandeliers, ice sculptures, women in gowns that cost more than cars. Imani felt eyes turn toward them as they entered, curiosity and speculation written on every face. Ji-hoon moved through the crowd with confidence, his hand at the small of Imani's back, his spatial awareness so perfect that no one would guess he couldn't see. "Park Ji-hoon," a voice called. A Korean man in his 50s approached, his smile sharp. "I heard rumors of a wedding." I didn't believe them. "Lee Sang-min," Ji-hoon said smoothly. "Allow me to introduce my wife, Imani." Imani extended her hand, and Lee kissed it with exaggerated politeness, but his eyes were cold, assessing. "American," he said in Korean, apparently assuming she couldn't understand. "African-American," Imani corrected in English, her smile never faltering. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Lee." Lee's eyebrows rose. Ji-hoon's hand tightened almost imperceptibly at her back, pride maybe, or approval. "Your wife is full of surprises," Lee said, switching back to English. "Tell me, how did you two meet?" "She saved my life," Ji-hoon said before Imani could speak. 6 months ago, I was crossing the street, didn't hear the car coming. She pulled me back just in time. The lie was smooth, practiced. Imani wondered how many times he'd rehearsed it. How romantic, Lee said dryly. And now you're married. Quite fast. When you know, Imani interjected, leaning into Ji-hoon's side. I couldn't imagine my life without him. Lee studied them both for a long moment, then smiled without warmth. I wish you happiness then. Marriage is complicated. He walked away, and Ji-hoon's hand slid up to cup the back of Imani's neck, a gesture that looked affectionate, but felt like a warning. Well done, he murmured. But we're being watched. Kiss me. What? Kiss me like you mean it. Now. Imani turned into him, rising on her toes to press her lips to his, but Ji-hoon wasn't satisfied with chaste. His hand tangled in her hair, the other pulling her flush against him as he kissed her with an intensity that stole her breath. His tongue swept past her lips, claiming, possessing, and Imani forgot they were pretending, forgot they were in public, forgot everything except the heat of his mouth and the hard press of his body. When he finally pulled back, Imani was dizzy. Ji-hoon's eyes were still unfocused, but his pupils were dilated, his breathing uneven. That should convince them, he said, his voice rough. Yeah, Imani managed. Convincing. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of introductions and careful lies. Imani played her part perfectly, the devoted wife, the woman who looked at her husband like he hung the moon. And the terrifying part was how easy it became, how natural it felt to touch him, to lean into his space, to laugh at his dry comments that only she could hear. They were dancing, Ji-hoon navigating the floor through sound and memory, when he spoke again. Someone is following us. Imani's smile didn't falter, but her heart raced. Where? 3 o'clock, grey suit. He's been tracking us since we arrived. Ji-hoon pulled her closer, his lips at her ear. When this song ends, go to the ladies' room. Dae-jung will follow. Don't come out until he gets you. Ji-hoon, trust me. The song ended. Imani excused herself with a practiced smile, walking toward the restrooms with her head high despite the fear crawling up her spine. She felt eyes on her back. The man in the grey suit, she was certain. Her hands trembled as she pushed through the door into the marble-tiled bathroom. She wasn't alone. Another woman stood at the mirror, older, with severe features and calculating eyes. So you're Park's new wife, the woman said in accented English. I am, Imani replied carefully. Tell him the Lotus Triad sends their regards. The woman's smile was a knife. And their congratulations on such a beautiful bride. It would be a shame if something happened to her. She left before Imani could respond, and suddenly Dae-jung was there, his hand on Imani's elbow. Are you hurt? No, but... Imani recounted the encounter, watching Dae-jung's expression darken. Come, we're leaving. Ji-hoon was already at the entrance when they arrived, his posture tense. He didn't speak until they were in the car, doors locked, speeding away from the hotel. What did she say? He asked, his voice deadly calm. Imani repeated it. Ji-hoon's jaw clenched, a muscle ticking in his cheek. They threatened you, he said. Not a question. They threatened a hypothetical future harm, Imani corrected. It's different. Not to me. Ji-hoon turned his head toward her, and even though he couldn't see, Imani felt the weight of his rage. No one threatens what's mine. No one. I'm not actually yours, Imani said softly. This is fake, remember? The contract is real. The ring is real. The protection is real. Ji-hoon reached out, his hand finding hers with unerring accuracy. And the consequences for threatening you are very, very real. His thumb stroked across her knuckles, the gesture at odds with the violence in his voice. Imani should have been terrified. Instead, she felt that dangerous warmth again, the one that whispered she was safer with this blind, deadly man than she'd ever been in her life. What happens now? She asked. Now? Ji-hoon's smile was cold. Now I remind the Triads why it's a mistake to test me, and you, my devoted wife, stay home where you're safe. Not a chance, Imani said. You said honesty, remember? I'm in this now. I deserve to know what's coming. Ji-hoon was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded, just once. Then you'll know. But Imani. Yeah? When things get dangerous, and they will, you do exactly what I say. No arguments. Your life depends on it. Imani squeezed his hand, feeling the calluses she hadn't noticed before. Evidence of violence, of survival. Deal. The car pulled up to the mansion, and as they walked inside, Ji-hoon's hand never left the small of her back. Protective, possessive, Real in ways that terrified Imani more than any threat from the triads ever could. Because somewhere between the wedding and tonight, the lines between fake and real had started to blur, and Imani wasn't sure she wanted to find them again. The next morning, Imani woke to raised voices outside her door. She pulled on a robe and emerged to find Ji-hoon and Dae-jung in heated discussion in Korean. Both men stopped when they noticed her. "What's wrong?" Imani asked. "Nothing that concerns you," Ji-hoon said, but his tone was strained. "Bullshit. I can tell when I'm being lied to." Imani crossed her arms. "What happened?" Dae-jung and Ji-hoon exchanged a look. Finally, Ji-hoon sighed. "There was an incident last night, after the gala. One of the triad's lower-level enforcers was found dead in an alley near the hotel. And they think you did it," Imani guessed. "They know I did it," Ji-hoon corrected. "The question is whether they're foolish enough to retaliate." "You killed someone." The words felt surreal in her mouth. "Because of what that woman said to me. I killed someone because they threatened my wife. That's unacceptable." Ji-hoon's voice was matter-of-fact, as if he were discussing the weather. "I gave them fair warning. They chose to ignore it. Imani should have run, should have called the police, broken the contract, fled back to her tiny apartment and her simple life. But her grandmother was alive and receiving the best care money could buy because of this man. And somewhere in the past week she'd started to understand the brutal logic of his world, a world where weakness invited predation, where protection came with a price written in blood. What happens now?" she asked instead. "Now we wait," Dae-jung said. "They'll respond. The question is how." The answer came 3 days later. Imani was at the hospital visiting her grandmother when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. A photo loaded, her walking into the hospital, taken from across the street. The message below was simple. "Pretty wife. Would be a shame if she got hurt visiting grandmother." Imani's blood turned to ice. She immediately called Dae-jung, who arrived within minutes, with 2 additional security personnel. They escorted her back to the mansion in a convoy that felt like overkill until she remembered the photo, the threat, the very real danger she was in. Ji-hoon was waiting in the foyer, and the moment Imani walked through the door, he pulled her into an embrace that took her breath away. His hands roamed her arms, her back, her face, checking for injuries with desperate thoroughness. "I'm fine," she said, but her voice shook. "They just sent a photo. They sent a threat." Ji-hoon's hands framed her face, his thumbs brushing her cheeks. "They told you they could reach you whenever they wanted. That's not fine, Imani. That's war." "Then maybe we should—" She stopped, unsure what she was even suggesting. "Run, hide, surrender. Should what?" Ji-hoon's voice was dangerously soft. "Should I let them think they can intimidate me by threatening you? Should I show weakness and invite every organization in California to take their shot? I didn't build what I have by backing down, and I sure as hell won't start now, even if it gets me killed. Especially then, because if anything happens to you, there won't be a triad left alive in this city." Ji-hoon pulled her closer, his forehead resting against hers. "You're mine, Imani. Mine to protect, mine to keep safe. And anyone who thinks otherwise is going to learn a very painful lesson." The possessiveness should have felt suffocating. Instead, it felt like safety, like being claimed by something more powerful than the fear, more certain than the threats. Imani's hands came up to clutch his shirt, holding on like he was the only solid thing in a spinning world. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Good. Fear keeps you careful." Ji-hoon's lips brushed her temple. "But don't ever doubt that I'll burn this city down before I let anyone hurt you." For 3 days the mansion became a fortress. Armed guards patrolled the grounds. Security cameras covered every angle. Imani wasn't allowed to leave, not even to visit her grandmother. Mrs. Kim brought meals to her room and the isolation started to feel like a cage. On the 4th day, Ji-hoon found her in the library, staring out at the garden she couldn't access. "You're angry," he said. "I'm trapped," Imani corrected. "There's a difference." "You're safe. There's no difference that matters more." Ji-hoon moved to stand beside her, his shoulder brushing hers. "Tell me what you're thinking." "I'm thinking I traded one prison for another. At least when I was poor I could go where I wanted. Now I'm rich and trapped in a mansion with guards and guns and a husband who kills people." Imani turned to face him. "Is this really my life now?" "For now. Until the triads realize their threats won't work." Ji-hoon reached out, his hand finding her arm and trailing up to her shoulder. "I know this is hard, but I need you to trust that I know what I'm doing." "Do you?" Imani challenged. "Because from where I'm standing it looks like you poked a hornet's nest and now we're both getting stung. They poked first. I'm just making sure they regret it." Ji-hoon's hand cupped her cheek, and Imani found herself leaning into the touch despite her anger. "One more week, that's all I need. 1 week to handle this, and then you can have your freedom back. Visit your grandmother. Walk outside. Live your life. While married to you?" "While protected by me," Ji-hoon corrected. "There's a difference." But was there? Imani studied his face. The sharp jawline, the full lips, the unseeing eyes that somehow found hers anyway. In the past 2 weeks, she'd learned to read his micro-expressions, the subtle shifts that indicated mood. Right now he was worried, genuinely deeply worried in a way his calm voice didn't reveal. "Ji-hoon," she said softly, "are you scared?" His jaw clenched. "I don't get scared." Liar. For a long moment he was silent. Then quietly, "I'm terrified. Not for myself, I've been in worse situations, but for you. You're the variable I can't control, the weakness I can't eliminate. Every threat against you is a knife to my gut, and I can't see them coming. I can't watch your back the way I need to. That scares me more than anything has in years." The admission cost him. Imani could tell by the way his shoulders tensed, the vulnerability he'd let slip past his defenses. She stepped closer, her hands coming up to rest on his chest. "Then let me help," she said. "Stop treating me like breakable porcelain. I'm stronger than I look. I know you are. That's not the point." Ji-hoon's hands found her waist, pulling her flush against him. "The point is that you shouldn't have to be strong. You shouldn't have to fight. That's my job." "And what's my job? Stand around looking pretty and scared? Your job is to stay alive and drive me crazy with worry." Ji-hoon's lips quirked into something almost like a real smile. "You're excelling at both." Imani laughed despite herself, the sound breaking the tension. "You're impossible. I've been told." Ji-hoon's hands slid up her back, one tangling in her hair. "Imani." "Yeah? Thank you." "For what?" "For not running. For trusting me even when you shouldn't. For being stronger than anyone should have to be." His voice dropped to a whisper. "For being mine." And then he was kissing her, not for show, not for an audience, but because he wanted to. His mouth claimed hers with desperate intensity, and Imani kissed him back with equal fervor, her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, and Ji-hoon made a sound low in his throat that sent heat racing through her veins. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Imani rested her forehead against his chest. "This is a bad idea," she murmured. "Terrible," Ji-hoon agreed. "Want to do it again?" "Absolutely." This time the kiss was slower, deeper, full of promises neither of them should make. When Ji-hoon finally pulled back, his expression was dazed, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. "1 week," he said. "Give me 1 week to end this, and then we'll figure out what the hell we're doing." Deal. But the universe, it seemed, had other plans. That night at 3 in the morning, an explosion rocked the mansion, and Imani's world shattered into flames and gunfire, and Ji-hoon's voice shouting her name through the chaos. The explosion came from the east wing, far enough from the bedrooms that no one was hurt, but close enough to wake everyone with its thunderous roar. Imani stumbled out of bed, ears ringing, to find Ji-hoon already at her door, Daijung at his shoulder. "Get dressed." "Dark clothes, comfortable shoes," Ji-hoon commanded. "We're leaving now." "What's happening?" The triads decided to escalate. The explosion was a distraction. "There are armed men at the perimeter." Ji-hoon's hand found her arm, squeezing once. 3 minutes, move." Imani moved. She threw on jeans, a black sweater, sneakers, grabbed her phone and the small bag she kept packed, a habit from childhood, when moving fast meant survival. When she emerged, Ji-hoon was wearing tactical gear, a gun holstered at his hip. The sight should have been terrifying. Instead, it was oddly reassuring. "Basement," Daijung said. "Tunnel to the garage 3 blocks over. Cars already there." They moved through the mansion like shadows, Mrs. Kim and the household staff already evacuated through a different route. The sounds of gunfire echoed from outside, Ji-hoon's security engaging the attackers. Down a flight of stairs, through a wine cellar to a hidden door that opened onto a narrow concrete tunnel. "Stay close," Ji-hoon said, taking Imani's hand. "Watch for—" The first gunman appeared at the tunnel's far end, raising his weapon. Daijung fired twice and the man dropped. Ji-hoon pulled Imani behind him, his body a shield as more shots rang out. She felt him flinch, a bullet grazing his arm, but he didn't slow. "Keep moving," he growled. The tunnel seemed endless. More gunmen appeared, and Daijung handled them with brutal efficiency, while Ji-hoon navigated by memory and sound, pulling Imani along. They burst out into a garage, where a nondescript sedan waited, engine running. Get in, Ji-hoon ordered, pushing Imani toward the back seat. But before he could follow, another explosion, closer this time, rocked the structure. The ceiling cracked, concrete raining down. Go, Dae-jung shouted at the driver. Get her out of here. Not without him, Imani screamed, reaching for Ji-hoon. But Ji-hoon was already pushing her back, his face set in grim determination. Dae-jung will get me out. You need to go, now. No! Imani fought against the hands pulling her into the car. Ji-hoon, please, I'll find you, he said. And then the door slammed shut and the car was moving, accelerating away from the garage as another explosion lit up the night behind them. Imani pressed her face against the window, watching the flames grow smaller, and felt something crack inside her chest. The terror wasn't about her own safety anymore. It was about the blind man she'd left behind in a collapsing garage, the husband who'd become something more than a contract, the man she'd realized too late she was falling for. Where are we going? She asked the driver, her voice hollow. Safe house, Koreatown. Mr. Park's orders. The safe house was a modest apartment above a Korean restaurant, sparsely furnished but secure. 2 guards stayed with Imani, but she barely noticed them. She sat by the window, phone clutched in her hand, waiting for news. Hours passed. Dawn broke over Los Angeles. Her phone finally buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Package secure. Coming to you. Imani sagged with relief so intense she felt sick. He was alive. Ji-hoon was alive. He arrived an hour later, Dae-jung supporting him. His arm was bandaged, his face smudged with soot, his clothes torn and bloody. But he was walking, breathing, searching the room with his unfocused gaze until he found her. Imani, he said, and the raw relief in his voice broke her. She crossed to him in 3 strides, throwing her arms around him with enough force to make him stagger. Ji-hoon caught her, one arm banding around her waist, the other burying in her hair. He was trembling. This powerful, deadly man was shaking in her arms. I thought... Imani couldn't finish the sentence. I thought you were dead. Not yet. Too stubborn. Ji-hoon's hand cupped the back of her head, holding her against his chest. Are you hurt? Did anyone touch you? I'm fine. You're the one bleeding. Surface wound. Dae-jung patched me up. Ji-hoon pulled back just enough to run his hands over her face, her shoulders, her arms, checking for injuries with the same desperate thoroughness as before. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry you had to go through that. Don't apologize for keeping me alive, Imani said fiercely. Just promise me you'll stay alive too. I promise. Ji-hoon's forehead rested against hers, their breaths mingling. But Imani, we need to talk about what happens next. Let me guess. More hiding, more guards, more waiting for the next attack. No, Ji-hoon's voice was steel. No more hiding. They attacked my home, threatened my wife, tried to kill me in my own tunnel. That's a declaration of war, and I'm done being defensive. What are you saying? I'm saying it's time to end this. Permanently. Ji-hoon's hands framed her face, and even though he couldn't see her, his gaze felt like it burned straight through to her soul. But I need to know you're safe first. I need to know that if something goes wrong, nothing's going wrong, Imani interrupted, because I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. You can't see, Ji-hoon. You navigate by sound and memory, but in a new environment. Under stress with people shooting at you, you need someone watching your back. You need me. I need you alive, Ji-hoon corrected. If you die because of me, if I die, it'll be because I made my own choice, my own sacrifice, just like you'd do for me. Imani took his hands, squeezing hard. You said I was yours. Well, you're mine too. And I don't abandon what's mine. Ji-hoon was silent for a long moment, emotions warring across his face. Finally, he nodded. Together, then. But you do exactly what I say when I say it. No heroics. Says the man who literally used his body to shield me from bullets. That's different. No, it's not. Imani rose on her toes, pressing a soft kiss to his lips. But I love you anyway. The words slipped out before she could stop them, hanging in the air like a confession, a promise, a truth that changed everything. Ji-hoon went very still. You don't mean that, he said finally. It's adrenaline, stress, Stockholm syndrome. It's love, you idiot. Imani cupped his face, forcing him to listen. I'm in love with you. I didn't plan it, didn't want it. But somewhere between the fake wedding and real bullets, I fell for you. And I need you to know that before we walk into whatever hell you're planning. Ji-hoon's expression crumbled. His hands came up to cover hers, pressing them harder against his face. I'm not worth it, he whispered. I'm not worth your love, your sacrifice, your... Let me decide what you're worth. Imani kissed him again, pouring everything she felt into it. The terror, the relief, the desperate, aching love that had grown in the spaces between danger and protection. "You're worth everything to me, Imani." Her name was a prayer on his lips. "I love you too. God help me. I love you so much it terrifies me. You're supposed to be temporary, a contract, a convenience. But you became the only thing that matters, and that's dangerous for both of us. Then let's be dangerous together." Ji-hoon laughed, an actual, genuine laugh that transformed his face. "Together," he agreed, "but we do this smart. Dae-jung has a plan." The plan was insane, brilliant, and required Imani to play the role of her life. That night, she walked into the Lotus Triad's headquarters, a nightclub in Chinatown, wearing a wire and a prayer. The woman from the gala, the one who'd threatened her, met her at the door. "Mrs. Park, how bold of you to come here." "I need to make a deal," Imani said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "My husband is injured, vulnerable. I can give you his location for the right price." The woman's eyes gleamed with interest. "And why would you betray him?" "Because he's a monster. He's trapped me in this marriage, threatened my family, and I want out. Give me money and protection, and I'll give you Ji-hoon." The lies tasted like ash, but Imani sold them with desperate conviction. The woman studied her for a long moment, then gestured toward the back. "Come, let's discuss terms." They led her to an office where 3 men waited, the Triad leadership. Imani recognized the type: powerful, arrogant, accustomed to control. She explained her offer, negotiated a price, and provided the address of the safe house where Ji-hoon was supposedly hiding. "When?" the leader asked. "Tonight. He's weak, guards are minimal. It's your best chance." They took the bait, and when they arrived at the safe house 2 hours later, they found not a wounded Ji-hoon, but a fully armed tactical team led by FBI agents who'd been waiting for evidence of the Triad's criminal activities. The raid was swift, brutal, and captured every leader of the organization. Imani watched from a surveillance van 3 blocks away, Ji-hoon beside her, as her wire transmission played through speakers. The words she'd spoken, negotiating her husband's murder, had been enough to get the Triads to incriminate themselves on dozens of charges. "You did it," Ji-hoon said, his hand finding hers. "You were perfect." "I was terrified," Imani admitted. "But it worked. They're done. Thanks to you." Ji-hoon pulled her close, and for the first time since the explosion, Imani felt like she could breathe. "You saved us both." The FBI agent in charge, a woman named Chen, who'd apparently been working with Ji-hoon for months on this operation, approached. "Mr. Park, Miss Washington, we have enough to put these guys away for life. You're both free to go." "And his blindness?" Imani asked suddenly, a suspicion forming. Chen glanced at Ji-hoon, who sighed. "It's temporary. The doctors said I'd regain sight within 3 to 6 months. The surgery to remove the scar tissue is scheduled for next week." "You lied to me," Imani said slowly. "I needed the Triads to think I was vulnerable, needed everyone to underestimate me." Ji-hoon turned toward her, his expression earnest. "But everything else, the marriage, the protection, the feelings, none of that was a lie." Imani should have been angry. Instead, she felt a strange sort of relief. "So you're going to be able to see me soon." "Terrifying thought," Ji-hoon said with a small smile. "What if I don't like what I see?" "Then you're an idiot." Imani kissed him, quick and fierce. "Because I'm gorgeous." "I know. Dae-jung told me." They drove back to a different safe house, one not compromised by the night's operation. And in the quiet aftermath, with danger finally behind them, Ji-hoon and Imani lay tangled together on a too small couch, holding each other like lifelines. "What happens now?" Imani asked. "The contract says 1 year, but—" "Screw the contract," Ji-hoon interrupted. "I'm not letting you go. Not in a year, not ever. If you want out, you'll have to fight me for it." "Who said I want out?" Imani traced the line of his jaw, marveling at how this dangerous man had become her safety. "Maybe I like being Mrs. Park, even knowing what I am, what I've done, especially knowing. You're not just a crime lord, Ji-hoon. You're the man who protected me, who killed for me, who learned to trust me when trust doesn't come easy. You're mine, and I'm keeping you." Ji-hoon's smile was brilliant, unguarded, real. "Then I guess we're stuck with each other." "Guess so." Imani settled against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "By the way, when you can see again, you're taking me on a proper date. Flowers, dinner, the whole thing. Deal. But fair warning, I'm going to spend the entire time staring at you and probably forgetting how to form sentences." I can live with that. They fell asleep like that, two people who'd started as strangers in a contract and became something infinitely more precious. And in the morning, when Ji-hoon woke to find Imani still in his arms, he whispered the words that had been building since the moment she'd refused to abandon him. You saved my life. You saved my life. In every way a person can be saved. Imani stirred, smiling against his chest. Told you I was worth keeping. Best investment I ever made, Ji-hoon agreed. And for the first time in his dangerous, carefully controlled life, he meant it completely. Years had passed since the night everything changed. The seasons had shifted, time had woven its magic, and Los Angeles still sprawled beneath endless blue skies. But for Imani and Ji-hoon, the world had transformed entirely. Ji-hoon's sight had returned gradually, the surgery successful beyond anyone's expectations. The first time he'd seen Imani, truly seen her, he'd stood frozen for a full minute, taking in her rich brown skin, her expressive eyes, the natural beauty of her hair styled in twists. Then he'd pulled her into his arms and wept against her shoulder, overwhelmed by the reality of the woman he'd only known through touch and sound and feeling. You're more beautiful than I imagined, he'd whispered, and I imagined you were perfect. They'd made the marriage real in every sense that mattered. The contract had expired, and they'd renewed their vows in a ceremony Imani actually remembered, with her grandmother in the front row, healthy and beaming, and Daijung as best man looking uncomfortable in a tuxedo. Ji-hoon had transitioned his business interests toward legitimate enterprises, using his connections and resources to build an empire that didn't require violence. He still had teeth, still commanded respect and fear when necessary, but he'd found other ways to achieve power, ways that didn't keep Imani awake at night worrying he wouldn't come home. Imani had finished her degree, studying business and working alongside Ji-hoon to understand the empire she'd married into. She'd proven herself sharp, strategic, and utterly fearless in negotiations. His associates learned quickly that Mrs. Park was not decorative. She was essential. Now in their new home, a sprawling estate in Pacific Palisades with ocean views and rooms filled with light, Imani stood on the terrace watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. She heard Ji-hoon's footsteps behind her, felt his arms wrap around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. Happy? He asked. Deliriously, Imani confirmed, leaning back into his warmth. Who knew accidentally marrying a crime lord would work out so well? Former crime lord, Ji-hoon corrected. I'm a respectable businessman now. Mostly. Mostly, Imani agreed with a laugh. She turned in his arms, looking up at the face she'd first known only through touch. Even after years, she still caught her breath sometimes, at how beautiful he was, but it was the expression in his eyes when he looked at her that truly stole her breath. Pure adoration, fierce protection, absolute devotion. I love you, she said, because some words never got old. I love you too, Ji-hoon replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Thank you for saving me, Imani, for being brave enough to sign that contract, for staying when any sane person would have run, for loving me when I didn't deserve it. You deserved it, Imani corrected firmly. You've always deserved it. You just needed someone to see past the walls. Ji-hoon's phone buzzed. Daijung, probably, with some business update. But Ji-hoon ignored it, his attention entirely on his wife. I was thinking, he said carefully, maybe it's time we talked about expanding our family. Imani's eyes widened. Are you saying... I'm saying this house is too big for just two people. I'm saying I want to see you holding our child. I'm saying I want to build something permanent with you, not just a business or a marriage, but a legacy, a family. Ji-hoon's hands framed her face, his touch infinitely gentle. If you want that too. Imani's answer was a kiss that communicated everything words couldn't. Yes, always, forever. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and grinning, Ji-hoon rested his forehead against hers. Who would have thought, he mused, that a fake marriage would turn into the realest thing in my life? Who would have thought, Imani countered, that a blind mob boss would turn out to be the man of my dreams? Former blind mob boss, Ji-hoon corrected with a laugh. Let's get the details right for the grandkids. Deal. Imani took his hand, leading him back inside their home, their real home, built on love and trust and the kind of partnership that survived bullets and explosions and danger. Come on, husband. Let's start working on that legacy. And as the sun set over Los Angeles, painting their world in shades of gold, Imani Washington Park and her husband walked into their future, together, always, exactly as they were meant to be.